you know, if we were that was the case, we would all be unemployed, from plumbers to psychologists. We all turn to each other because we have different expertise. I'm a psychologist, but I would make a lousy plumber because my spatial skills would make reading the diagrams extremely difficult for me. But that doesn't make me any less of an adult because I need help to decipher floor plans if I'm trying to renovate my office. The hard part, though, for teens is they usually want to ask for less help, not more help. So what I try to talk to them about, and what you can talk to them about, is really looking at asking for help as help supporting their goals and their success and their independence. And here's where we as parents need to be self-aware, to speak to the point that you raised. I think we're human too, so we all give unsolicited advice. It's just kind of like in our DNA, I think, as parents. It became a joke with my daughter and I when she was in high school, because she knew that I was trying to be respectful of when she wanted help and when she didn't, and, but nobody's perfect. So I do think, though, if you can aim for the idea of finding out if your child and teen wants help before you jump into giving. They want to feel like they own their own decisions, so sometimes we may feel like we're helping, but we may inadvertently take over. I think it's pretty simple as long as you can remember it, which is to ask, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to not do? How can I help? Because I think what happens is if we help more than they need, it backfires and it communicates that we don't really trust their abilities and we don't have confidence that they can handle things. Again, kind of in line with what you said. And I think that if you ask questions like, do you want my help? How do you want my help? The hard part isn't asking the questions, it's remembering to ask the questions. Because that way the teens are really still in charge of getting their needs met, and they can still feel like you're respecting their independence even as you're helping them. It's a paradox, but I think the more parents can respect the teen's independence, the easier it'll actually be for the parents to be helpful to the teen. So I'll just close with remembering the 3 steps I mentioned, and you can think of yourself as a teen, or you can think of talking to your teens about them, which is to learn about your strengths and weaknesses and become more comfortable with them, and then ask for help when they need it. I think it's so hard for teens these days that they really do need support and help, and I think finding a way to allow them to feel more independent and pursue their passions without having to do it all by themselves is really crucial for their mental health. So thank you. We'll talk more, I'm sure.
Thank you, Elinor. And we'll close with Elizabeth Starks.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Elwards. I'm a psychotherapist and the director of Village Counseling Services, which is a group practice here in Lawrenceville. There's about 16 of us. We have a psychiatrist, psychologist, and psychotherapist working there. So Katie had asked me to come and talk about our dialectical behavior therapy program that we run. And I mean, first of all, it is really hard for teens, and it's really hard for parents, too. That's what I was thinking. You all have great things to say, and I think it's so much work for us to, as parents, to evaluate, what to apply and what works where and what our kid needs. It's a big job. So dialectical behavior therapy is a year-long program for adults and teens. We have a specific teen program. For kids that are emotionally dysregulated and have negative coping skills in order to manage that emotion dysregulation. And what that really means is they usually have a really high distress level, and they get triggered very easily, and their distress level goes up higher than sort of the norm, and they have real difficulty soothing themselves back down to a comfortable, peaceful level. So they tend to just go up and up and up, and the only way to get out of that cycle is to use a negative coping skill. So the negative coping skills can be anything from disordered eating to cutting to suicidal thinking to defiant behavior, anger. It could be any compulsive behavior at all. So I really think that dialectical behavior therapy would be a great curriculum for all adolescents at some point to be put into the regular high school curriculum or maybe even the middle school curriculum to get them started nice and early. But it's specifically for people with that emotion dysregulation and the negative coping skills, and that they're managing it with negative coping skills, because it's a skills training program where we teach them to use other skills to replace the negative coping skills. So who's appropriate for dialectical behavior therapy are people that are kids, I guess, teens that it's a biosocial sort of diagnosis. So they're usually kids that are extremely sensitive. It's a hypersensitivity that they're born with. It's not something that they acquire. And there's a good portion of our population that has this hypersensitivity. They feel things really deeply. I'd say a lot of therapists have this hypersensitivity. And it's actually an asset. It's not a negative. They have deep empathy and they can be really wonderful human beings. But sometimes they develop sort of a reaction to that hypersensitivity if they are in an environment that's really invalidating. And there's many, many ways the environment can be invalidating. And I could spend a lot of time talking about that invalidation. Sometimes it's from the family, sometimes it's from the school environment. It can be in many, many different places. It's just wherever they're given the message that the way that they're feeling is not appropriate to the circumstances. So you can just imagine where, how that might be, because it can turn out where just a parent saying, a child comes to them and says something like, my feelings are really hurt because of what so-and-so said, and the parent can just say, oh, well, that's okay, you don't have to feel that way. And they're just trying to help their child. But for a hypersensitive, you can feel this way, but well, she didn't really mean that or anything. If you don't validate that emotion or that feeling that the hypersensitive child is having, they start to develop what I call like an allergic reaction to that emotion, and they start feeling that there's something wrong with that emotion. And this is what starts to create this higher level of distress. So they'll have an emotion, they'll have a negative feeling about the emotion that they're having, their distress level will go up even higher, then they'll have a negative feeling about that because they're starting to sense and they're getting feedback from the community that their reaction to this event is too great, and then they feel bad about themselves even more, and then it goes up even higher, right? So you can see, and it gets up here, we rate it in DBT from 0 to 100. 0 being no distress at all, 100 being the most intolerable level of distress. And so nobody can, people cannot tolerate high levels of distress for very long, and so what they tend to do in this case is they go into what we call a mindless state, and they use a negative coping skill to bring themselves back down into some level of comfort. And so this is like a really functional system that works really well and gets them back. They have to. They have to be relieved from that level of distress, right? Unfortunately, when they're using negative coping skills, they are, developing. They have all these side effects, these negative coping skills, that result in all sorts of problems. There's all these consequences to that. So typically, when someone comes to us for DBT, it's usually their quality of life has gotten really small because they don't want to get into circumstances that are going to trigger them, and their distress level is going to go up, so they start to avoid, and they start to withdraw, and they don't really want to interact very much because they just don't want to feel, they don't want to go through that whole cycle and then use that negative coping skill or skills and then feel all the negative consequences and low self-esteem. So DBT is really about building mastery. Like, you're still going to have that hypersensitivity, because that's the good thing. You're going to feel things deeply, but you will realign the way you feel, you think about that, and you'll have a new relationship with your emotions so that you can actually have that experience, feel that emotion. When your stress gets high, use a positive coping skill, bring your stress level down, feel like you've built mastery and that you can conquer the world, and you can go out there and you can actually interact and do all the things that you wanted to do because you're not afraid anymore of being triggered. So that's sort of the person that would be coming to DBT. And the way it's applied is there's one individual session a week and a skills training group that they have to participate in. And there's phone coaching. And as Mark was talking about, the phone coaching and the skills training are all about generalizing the skills to their environment. So first they start by using the skills in group with a whole bunch of other adolescents. And they get comfortable sort of being uncomfortable and having their stress level go up and use those skills and practice those skills. And then they go out and use them at home. And then they get phone coaching to continue to use those skills. when they're home, because if they're not using the skills when they're at school or when they're at home or when they're in their environment, it's not going to take. We also have the parents come in and they participate in a simultaneous parent group that they learn the whole curriculum that their children are learning. Because once again, unless the parents are participating and doing it at home, it's less likely to take. And you know, if the child is particularly young and they're too young for the group, what we'll do is sort of a modified DBT program where we'll do all the skills training in an individual or a family session with the family and the child together, because it's really important for the skills to just be generalized and have lots and lots of practice, which is why it takes a year. It takes 6 months to go through the entire curriculum. There's 4 modules. The first module is distress tolerance, and that is, you know, if you're up here at 100, how to bring yourself down to like an 80. And those are usually body-centered skills, like, believe it or not, dunking your head in a bucket of ice water, jumping jacks, or any sort of, you know, holding an ice cube and things like that, all the way down to like self-soothing things and feeling, you know, using your 5 senses. And we have the kids make a box of all their self-soothing things. So they have something in it that smells good, feels good to the touch, pictures, music, things like that. So the higher levels, like, you know, jumping jacks, and then you can do anything from like distracting to like counting backwards in increments of 7, which is a whole set, quite a large group of skills that they learn. And then the next set of skills is emotion regulation, and that's where they really learn that their emotions are a function of their thinking. I think Mark was talking about this a little bit. You know, the idea that they have no control over their emotion, and that emotions are this fabulous like universal language that everybody speaks in every country exactly the same way, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're completely appropriate. And so if you're thinking sad thoughts, you're going to have a sad emotion, and that's like perfect. They have no control over their emotions at all. They love that until we tell them that, but they have control over what they think, so when they change what they think, they can actually control the emotion that they're having in that way. So they can control their thoughts, they can't control the emotion. And that's sort of emotion regulation, where we really focus on, I think Mark mentioned something about this. We talk about it in terms of black and white thinking, just thinking in extremes, you know, judgments versus facts, and breaking all those things down so that they can really start to see how they can actually think of things in a different way, and it will change the emotion that they have that goes with that. That's emotion regulation. And then the other module is interpersonal effectiveness, because most of these kids that are coming in are really, they might appear to be really competent in social situations or not. Some of them, it's all out there, they're having great difficulty, but they're usually really struggling internally with interpersonal relationships, and they get hurt real easily, and there's a constant conflict going on. So the interpersonal effectiveness is the last module that they learn after they've learned distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness comes in, so that they can work towards achieving their, getting their goals and their needs met in really effective ways. Because usually at that point they've used a lot of different techniques to get their needs met that are just not effective. It's like, you know, chronically dissatisfying for them. And then in between each one of those modules is mindfulness practice, which is a big part of DBT. DBT is a cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's married together with mindfulness practice. And so they learn to practice mindfulness over and over and over again, because you know, mindfulness with the concept that it's paying attention to one thing at a time on purpose without any judgment. So they practice this art of choosing where they want to put their focus. You know, choosing to focus over there, and then making a choice and changing their focus to be over there. They start to practice this repetitively and until they are able to, even in highly distressful situations, choose to move their focus from here to over there. And that's what that practice is really about. So DBT really is cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness therapy sort of intertwined like that. And it works so beautifully, because the compulsive coping skills that they do to manage their distress can't happen in a mindful state. You can't be compulsive in a mindful state. So teaching them to actually have control over where they put their focus, choose to think about this rather than this, and they really just start to develop a mastery over their own thoughts and therefore their own emotions, and they develop a sense of competency and powerfulness, and it's a really wonderful thing to see. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So